Silver surge, decoding India's 2025 import boom. Hi everyone and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, welcome back Bailey. He's been looking at some very specific information coming out of India here that I wasn't really aware of until now. How are you going today, Bailey?
Very good, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, good. Now, you were like, we tend to think of Indian demand for gold. We know that's been a thing for a long time, and we know we've just been through Diwali, and we know there's lots of people buying gold. But I wasn't really aware of what was going on with silver, and that was really quite interesting because obviously India's got a massive population. There's lots to discuss here, but talk us through the specifics here because some policy seems to have changed a little bit that seems to be impacting silver and its demand out of India.
Yeah, and I think when we think about Diwali and these festivals, it is gold because that is so deeply rooted in their culture. But when we speak to a lot of Indian customers that come through, silver is a big part of it as well. So I think it does get forgotten as it often does, silver. But silver is deeply rooted in the cultural roots there too with our Indian customers. But the main policy change that I suppose I think theoretically, just theorizing, that's come more out of trying to meet demand is that they've actually cut the major import duty from 15% to 6%. So what that's basically signaling is they just want silver, as does the rest of the world. But I suppose we can get into a little bit as to why that could possibly be.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it feels like almost a China playbook there. I know with gold, China was very much implementing export controls. So they were trying to keep the gold that they had in place. You would think if they're reducing import duties, it's kind of the same play. They want to keep the silver flowing in.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's due to a number of factors. I think the population is obviously a large one with India, as it often is. It's why they're a growth area for a developing nation. There is a lot of value looking into a lot of investment opportunities in India, but the government has really made a big point of investing into a lot of the things that silver's used in. So green energy is a massive push in India. So that and of course tech infrastructure is huge in India. So those are two areas where silver is used quite a lot, obviously. And I think along with that too, what you find is that from a retail point of view is that individuals are holding on to their silver a lot more. So what we're seeing a massive reduction, particularly in India, of recycled silver. So people aren't selling it back to the jewelers. They aren't selling it back. It's not circulating around as much because even though the price is up, people want to hold on to it. So that's a side of the flow bottleneck that I suppose doesn't get discussed as much.
Do you think, obviously there's that part you're talking about, but is it also a change generally in investor behavior coming out of India? Because I wonder if it seems to be in other areas that there's more of a push towards ETFs and things, just generally the population becoming more middle class, more focused on these investment vehicles. So have you found any of that in your research? Is it just coins that they're buying? Is it bars? Is it ETFs? Is like, what are they actually buying?
Yeah, I mean, particularly at the moment, there's a surge through Diwali, as we know there always is. But definitely over this year, inflows into silver-backed ETFs for India have actually tripled this year.
Right.
So yes, people are turning to it as the alternative to gold. But the flow in from silver has been astronomically larger through the Indian population. It's just something that I think that is starting to become relevant across the globe, but I just think it's very unique from the Indian perspective, just given India's role and the focus that a lot of investors put onto India because of not only the population, but the continued population growth and the export of that population and those skills as well. So it's something that I think is really interesting that the government is now encouraging that, because I think that's also symbolic of not only them wanting it and wanting it to continue to circulate, but also you could also see that as an encouragement as well too to the rest of the world and maybe industrial players and suppliers of silver to enter that market. So I think when you combine that encouragement for the move of silver with the rest of the factors that make India a popular country for big industrial players. I think that's just a very interesting thing that they're starting to do there.
And the other side of that, you mentioned it before, the growing demand that we've seen in green tech. I mean, this is global. It's not specific to any one country. We know that there has been, as demand for green technologies increases, so does the demand for silver because it's used in all of them. But I wonder, when you're talking about a population so large, when you think about a government like the Indian government sort of taking a bit of a stance in this green tech space, it would seem that the demand will just continue to grow there if that's the case, because we've seen that in other countries. I mean, you take Australia as the example. We know our solar panel production and all of that, or solar panel use at least, is massive. I imagine that flows through probably at scale when you're talking about countries like India really jumping on board.
Yeah, and I think the at scale is the point there. I mean, industry for silver use accounts for about 59%, right? And I would argue that is going to possibly grow or reduce depending on how much the investor sentiment goes into it. But I would argue that will increase as we move towards more of these globally. I mean,
Mm.
towards these sectors. Um, so solar PV alone is expected to double demand by 2030. So tech growth in India is directly fueling the silver imports and the higher prices for them too, because it's just that scale. There is just such a large population that are becoming more educated, that are becoming more financially savvy, clearly encouraged by the government as well too in these areas.
Yeah.
I think it's a no brainer, particularly if you're on the other side of that and you were an investor. That could be an interesting angle to play if you're, say, a metals investor and you were looking into maybe not just holding the metal, and you want to we have a lot of people who look at miners and ETFs and trading it that way. I think it's just a different way that you can look at maybe some opportunities in that space too, because I do think that there are a lot of people around the world who look at India as such a, I suppose, if you want to call it that, an undervalued play. I suppose you don't necessarily want to refer to a country as an undervalued play, but when we speak in these macroeconomic terms, it certainly is. And I think they're starting to make the right moves, particularly in our space, in the bullion space too. And I think that's really exciting that they really are encouraging that, and you could even argue desperately
Mm.
begging for it when they've halved their import duties. So I think that's just something that everyone should really be keeping an eye on: is what do they do now? Do they keep that encouragement going, or is this it? I would probably say that it won't be, but I suppose we will see.
I'd love to dig a little bit more into the recent sort of Diwali situation, because you were talking to me about this before. I thought it was really interesting that there were shortages and there was actually a whole lot of hype surrounding silver jewelry, which is unusual given the traditional focus on gold. And this is bringing back to what you sort of mentioned before, but it's just a point I'd love to touch on. Is there something changing there? Because you just mentioned about sort of the modernization, if you will, of the investor here. But is there also a little bit of cultural change going on, perhaps, that is at play as well? Because that did seem to be something different that we hadn't heard of really before.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'm not going to profess to be an expert on Indian and Hindu culture, but what I can say from what I've seen empirically is, I think from an affordability point of view, you know, gift giving is a big part of these auspicious buying times and these
Yeah.
festivals for Indian people. So you got to think that now a gram of gold can be upwards of 200 Australian dollars. So knowing that silver is also an acceptable gift to give during those times, it's just much more affordable from that perspective. But if you take that one step further, the jewelers, of course, the construction of this, the jewelers are struggling to meet new orders, particularly in India, because of largely because of what I've mentioned before, the flow. When we talk about flow on this massive scale, big shipping containers bringing stuff in, it's even the small players on the ground. People are wanting to hold on to their silver. They aren't wanting to sell back their junk scrap silver, which is how a lot of jewelers operate. They'll get it cheaper, melt it down because they can. That's what they do. So because people are holding on to their metals for longer, they're not wanting to sell. The flow, even at that sort of smaller boots on the ground level, is starting to be quite strained. So the less scrap that's getting recycled, that's making it more difficult. So there's scarcity even at that sort of smaller grassroots level that we're starting to see come into the market. So particularly when you combine that with these large festivals and these auspicious buying times, that creates a little bit of a compounding effect.
Last question to sort of wrap this up then. Do you think this is a one-off of something that we're seeing at the moment because really several things all came together at once? We had the macroeconomics come together on it. We had the price just increasing, really all the things you've talked about here about why silver in particular was relevant this season. Is that ongoing, do you think? Like from the research that you've done, is the momentum there that this sustains well into 2026 and beyond? Is it long-term structural changes? How are you pulling it all together, thinking about the research that you've done there and how it applies beyond sort of this next little period of time?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's from a price point of view. I would definitely say that from an affordability point of view with the price, that absolutely, if you're someone who's buying a gift, whether you're it's for one of these festivals or just in general, if you want to get someone who into the market, it's going to be much more affordable to get silver, and even your smaller silver coins are getting to be quite a nice, generous gift to be received. So I definitely think from that perspective, absolutely, unless we see a massive retracement of the price, which of course we don't see something that large happening anytime soon. So I think that absolutely from that perspective, that will continue. Whether this becomes structural from a governmental point of view, I think that comes down to whether this supply bottleneck does open up. I mean, what we can see is that it's clear that they want more silver, and I would say that that's quite attractive to a lot of players in the market. But whether or not they actually get that, I think will determine whether or not we see them continue to pursue that more aggressively or not. But only time will tell on that one.
Look, that was absolutely fascinating discussion and really specific, looking at a specific segment of the market, a specific country, and how it all interplays with what we've been seeing with the price and everything here. I found that really fascinating, and it was an area that I wasn't really aware of before. So thank you so much for your work on that today, Bailey. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for having me on again.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.